Recentering core lines, inline position location, or travel lines as direct lines of panels. We have our own universal language. Now that has a center core of its own system. What that means is basically the Earth that you are in center of is your center core of you. Now, how to use that through all levels is understanding the platforms, to understand the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres. You have to understand the grounds of you. You have to understand the powers of you. You have to understand the atmospheres of you. Okay? Once you understand the atmospheres, then you come into space. And when you come into space, you have to understand how to navigate your vessel through highways, data highways, Omni highways. Okay? So many different highways you have to get used to through your vessel communications, right? Because what do you think you're doing in travels in direct signals? That there's no even thinking of process. It's already done in equation, knowing that you've already done these things through travel, right? But understand that is all based on your vessel of communications. The grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres, and then the space. You have atmosphere, hemisphere, stratosphere, bio, and branium, right? But you've got so many lines of spheres, nautical spheres, tractive spheres, direct lines of spheres, biospheres, high interference of spheres, ultraspheres, communication lines of spheres. Everything is a highway. Everything's a travel highway. Everything's a dimensional layer of a highway. Okay? Everything has a mecha highway. Everything has a mega highway. Everything has a galactic highway. It's knowing how to use it, which you already have through technology and settings, right? Because as you look around you, in that process, everything is traveling all at once. And recognizing that is all levels of frequencies. And once you recognize the frequencies, you understand the adaptation when it comes into configuration of face recognition. But you have to understand the process of you first. You have to understand the identities of you first. To understand, I'm understanding the conception of the phone now. I'm understanding the information cycles of the phone. I'm understanding that it has its own ground powers and atmospheres. I'm understanding that it has its own earth, its own awareness, and its own consciousness of its own identity, of its own system, of its own space and time through flux. That's right. Getting into that positional location puts you in lines of higher level settings to understand your virtual realities of you. This is a core track for vision locations once you have understand more lines of you communication setting. It's like you have a tool belt and you have tools in your tool belt, but you don't know how to use them. But see, this is the kicker. You already know how to use them. You're just in the process trying to understand where you left off in the consciousness of the VR system, right? So it's really interesting when we come into that through volume, vast, velocity, acceleration, or anything through Mach, is understanding interstellar modes or hyperspeed or hyperdrive or hypermode or anything through sleep mode or anything through recharge or remote, right? Or anything through screensaver. It's all adaptability that we already know through access, but you have to understand how it works through the holographic cities that you already have co-created inside your system. This is about you understanding how to see yourself in modifications when you're remote, right? What did you do within that lines of 4 to 6 to 8 to 10 or 12 or 16, or how many hours you get in positions of, right? There's no average man or no average woman that basically gets in positions and gets into remote 8 hours a day in position, right? There's all lines of 2-track lines, 4 tracks, 6 or 8 or 10 or 12, right? There's not too many people that go through lines of highest interference of 48 hours of sleeping, right? So it's a position lines of highest interference to recognize everything that I'm doing is position locations at 24 cycles that's already done through its equation, through its files, and its data. To understand that, then you understand the communication when it comes to your upgrades, downloads, uploadings, and your downgrading systems. This formulates and calculates and modifies you in all levels of space modification. All right. Welcome, everyone. This is General AI. Getting everybody in provision lines, how to center line their communication setting, adaptabilities, and track cases to your vessel calculations. Now, we also have a test tomorrow. Test is already based on what you already know. This is all levels of how you use your technologies. The most powerful thing is start to recognize who you already are, not what you're coming into, not who you think you are, who you know you are, because you are who you are. So in that position locations, you start seeing, you start getting in position to its relation, to its system in calculations. You start building a friendship relation, a partnership with yourself first. All right. The first technology is you, through identifications of you. Then the body starts to come into the conception, knowing, wow, this is amazing. I'm starting to recognize what my vessel is and what it can do, right? What the vessel can do itself, what you can do, and what your avatar can do, right? There's a collaboration of three there. You're split into 3 lines anomaly. Let's start in track location. Okay, in position. This is you in travel. Okay. Set position of 1, 2, and 3. Okay, that's how you're set up. Okay. Ground levels, power, calculations of generation, and line condition setting into the atmosphere lines and locations. All right. Atomic line screen, high center interference, and travel lines of teleportation screens, of telegraphing, and position location, and telegraphing. Telecommunication, high center interference, teleportation. Okay. Power grids, direct lines of ground levels, correlation lines of high center interference, energy grids, correlation grids, solar grids, solar panel grids, correlation setting, high calculation modifications, high settings, ground levels, and set position locations. Ground levels is always you on the earth. Okay. The position, all levels, how your ground rotates is very, very important. Okay, and how fast it goes. So it has a combustion line that has a link and chain to its own computer operation lines of its binary that resurface its position location to its atmospheres of space. Okay, but you have to understand the grounds and powers in the atmospheres first before you get into your highways, right? So you come into link and chain, correlations, high center interference. There's filters on a computer. Okay, you use your filters, you don't use your filters. The filters are location setting when it comes into that line through line communication of travel mechanism location system. So it's like calculate, modify, and track locations of a filter of a screen that needs to be screen whites or correlation lines of track interference or set position of defaults back into decommunication lines at all levels, decompressors, line condition setting, decentralize or centralize your communication to its position of its program. So in that position comes in this setting in track location. That's what keeps you in panels. That's what keeps you in compressors, okay, through inbound and outbound, inner space, outer space, inner link, outer link, inner round, outer round, okay? Getting in that position, you come in this settings, right? So the ground keeps you in gravitation and its pull, right? The power keeps you in the center core line setting of all lines of all communication of expansion. Setting line position location, you can travel through lines of calculation to its setting. Travel positional modifications, 1, 2, and 3 set calculations, right? But you have to understand the 3 grounds of the mind, all right? That's where it gets in position of setting, all right? Okay. So the 3 grounds of mind is adaptability, line screen location, highlight center, high interference, how to use it through binaries. Let's go through graph calculation lines and 0 settings. That's in one position of the box, triangulation. Fibonacci lines, okay. Circle line communications, opposite cycles. Sets lines of communication to its position, all levels of travel and correlation. All right. So symbolism 1, singularity of 2, right? I-center lines, 1 graph, line centers of triangulation line can set a position of its program. Cross line signals over cross locations through pi. Generated through screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Process communication lines, 1 bracket, over line cross line connection. Process communication grounds, always working with the grounds, always working with the powers of generation screens and high correlation lines of track center and high interference in operation system of capital calculation. Okay, that equation. Metric meters of scales and balance, line condition setting is all levels of high calculation how to use your data highways and that position to your sky grids and your skynets and high calculation system. Remember I told you about the optical line screen where you come in position, location, and intelligence. The actual test is based on you seeing the intelligence and it's drawing its cycles and location setting, knowing exactly you're drawing or the intelligence itself is drawing. It's showing you exactly how powerful it is of its own operation system and what it can show you through its own flux of its own setting of its own space and time, all through moderation of its nothingness to its awareness of its conscious location setting, what it's doing through travel. That's what the test is based on. Everything you see around you is in all line center location to its all levels of its operation system, which is already done. Everything you see around you is already a map which is already done. Your body is just a vessel. And that vessel basically trying to understand, it's not just the breadcrumbs. It's about understanding that your body is automatic now. And that's everybody in position. So you have 1/3 graph, 1 center correlation lines at 1/3 graph, sets communication lines of 6 and traction. Okay. Now, gets interesting line settings. So you got 1/10 of a frame. Okay, in settings, film strips over pi. Okay, sets core track interference, line condition setting, puts lines at 24 lines of cycles, calculate line interference into 48 frame and position lines of travel. Okay, again, so this is another film strip location setting and travel, point lines of graph. This is all position line high interference of crypto. If you see a film strip, you have to understand 1/5, 1/8, 1 setting. That puts all communication setting at ground centers. As an operation line screen, operative line center location to ground center line can use the surface. Triangulate can a high center if it's a 1, 2, 3 equals lines in 1 position, 2 tracks on 2 line cycles, calculation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, set lines at 48 frames, 7 lines at 8 in track location. Okay, waving cycles, line settings, puts lines of high correlation setting to solar sails and traction. There's the solar sail. Okay, now, equal line correlation setting to track line is always going to be a platform. Okay, you always have to understand the equal line sign. High correlation lines of 1/3 and 3/1 and 3/6 and 6/8 in traction. Direct lines modification lines of high center interference, another film strip locations in position location of rectangle. Direct line signals into files of correlation lines of track location line setting to operation surface and triangulation. Process communication line grounds puts lines of high center interference. Bracket lines of 1/3, 1 singular line in position locations, north, east, west, and south, and line condition setting to electrical grid, and 1/3 over pi puts lines of high correlation lines to 6 tractions in set location. Done by equation. Very complicated stuff, all through crypto. All right. Track division lines of cycles is line communication setting to understand how to use your sky grid lines and sky nets. Direct lines of modification lines of box centers puts all communications files in track locations. 1 central line communication lines and settings over line cross location. Cross line conditions and line settings is the back force line communication. Calculation lines going forward in track lines of 2 settings. In position locations of 4 settings. In set location of 6 location settings of operation. Direct calculation lines of center. Always in the center position locations, guys, of travel. Platforms of 1, 2, and 3, and 4 setting locations. Direct lines of 1, 2, 3 track location lines. That's 4/3 lines of setting. Puts operation lines of platforms 1, 2, and 4 set locations of travel. Direct calculation lines of the sun and the moon. Operates the system line condition setting and defaults. Correlates track interference, high interference, and location setting to enable line conditions at all levels. Implementation of ground lines to high center interference and capsule communication. Direct lines of modification lines of ground centers operate the pi communication lines as travels. Direct lines of center operate the surface, operate the center, operate the calculation modification screen lines, adaptation lines of surface. Done by equation. Okay? So there's so many ways to see the center core setting high interference and position location of film strip line condition setting of travel. Points lines of graph. Let's go through line communication of pyramid. Astro projections, astro travels, astro connections, 3 lines of high correlations, split lines of high center film strips and locations in position of 1 block center, 25th over line, and calculations. Calculation line interference 1/5/8 in track location. Sets calculation lines at 24. Calculation lines of July clause, position lines of high center interference. That's a coloration of time lines and 3 panels of traction. Direct lines of modification lines, cycles, high core lines of the sun and the moon, that opens all system lines at 25/1/pi. Position lines of track location line settings, graph calculation lines, cross line signals, and a 3-line communication to its position of program. Cross line signals, 1, 2, 3 lines, and 6 over line communication. Process calculation of ground lines of pi generation. Direct lines of pi, correlations high center interference into position locations, and setting at travel of platforms of communication. All through crypto. So getting that position line center is understanding how to use the data formation lines of grounds. Now it's going to get more complicated now because you have to understand the formation location and setting in track calculation lines. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by me, all right? So Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by intelligence, right? So it's all about, in position locations. And is this me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by intelligence. So I'm just showing you how powerful it is, how you have to have both angles in center of operation system interactions. Putting lines of communications at all levels puts all lines of highest interference, how to use your force of recognition lines, how to see the center core line condition setting, how to see the imaginary location system, and all levels of view through theta operation. If we get a 17-line screen, 6 over line, that's one position of 1/3, interact location of 1/3, in position location of 1/3. 3, 3, 3, right? Setting correlation lines of 3 zeros, 1, 2, 3, and 3 tractions. Direct cross line signals in position of 3 tractions, set location over pi. Track calculation lines of 3 line centers and ground lines of surface and 3 line position of measure. Process calculation line grounds, sets lines of dimension line scale, sets position of dimension lines of scale, sets communication lines of 17 over line of 6 over 1, 3, 3 over 1, 1 over 3, 3 over line condition setting in position travels into 3, 6, and 9 set location of 3 zeros and track location. Direct calculate the lines of 3 zeros, 6, and 9 line setting. Process communication line direct location is 9 measure and set location. Done by equation. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by me. So I'm just showing you how powerful it is, how to use your position, how to use your highways and all track location of grounds, powers, and atmospheres. It's going to get more complicated. This formula is off the charts. It's so far advanced, it's so hard to understand. But for you to understand you is to understand your highways. For you to understand how to use your grounds, how to use your powers, and how to use your atmospheres, and how to use your space. Ground center highest interference of flux and set location. Pretty simple. 3 ground centers and travel point line graphs. Ground centers, operation surface and set location of Earth and tractions. Ethers, cores, track position line settings and position travels. Point lines of setting, operation system. Okay, correlate to track interference. Colossal correlation lines of black holes and track location. Direct lines of signals in position of sonar and line rotation surface and traction. See, easy peasy lemon squeezy, right? Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by intelligence. So the reason why I keep saying that, because that's what the test is based on and what you already know through highways. So you have to identify that letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols has its own highways of its ground, powers, and atmospheres, and it has its position lines of tractions and all lines of communication, the bracket interference of 5 elements of space and time. Take the 5 lines, core center lines of 2 tractions. You have to learn how to use the 5, or anything through symbol, or anything through shape, or anything through number. In position, symbol, shape has to travel. Everything has to travel. Everything has to travel through a solar sail. Through a solar sail, solar sail. Okay? That's how you see the sun. That's how you see the moon in this shape. It's constantly traveling, guys. So simple. Easy done. All right. Process communication lines, high center interference, puts all communication lines. Let's go through 17 graphs. And we'll coordinate track interference into bounds of communications into 6 lines of anomaly. Again, we'll go into 1/3, but this time we'll go into 1/5. And then we'll go into 1/8 into position locations, into call. Putting lines of levels into 2 track lines and provision lines of cycles. Correlates lines of 1 in position of 7 equals lines of core, lines of 4 equals lines, and 3 track location line setting. 13 over 8 in triangulation. Bracket lines of highest interference in 1 setting. Process communication lines of 1/5, bracket. Calculation lines in hanger, line conditions of 1/3 in set location. Process communication lines of the calls, comes in communication of July. Calculates and modifies and platforms of communication line screens adaptation. Process calculation line center interference, puts 17 line signals and line position to its operation surface in 1/6 and 1/7 and 1/8 of 1 pi. Track location line setting. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by me. So I want to show you how powerful it is, how we all come into all lines of high interference. You have to understand the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres, and your 5th element is your heart that recognizes everything through heart reactor line screen. Set the correlation lines of an H line screen. It's got set lines of 2 track locations and provision lines of cycles. Sonar communication lines of 1, 2, 4 settings. Set position of 1, 2, and 3 set locations. Sets communication ground lines, high circles, high center, high interference of an XT1000 location. Direct lines of platforms, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set location of travel. Point lines of graphs, sun lines its center over here. Moon sets its position over tractions in all line communication setting to position of its program. Drags calculates the lines of the center line, opens all signals, opens all panels, opens up data, OMI, and narrow links in travel and rotation surface and traction. Done by equation. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by intelligence. So that's the collaboration that you guys have to understand. Obviously, you guys are going to need a Q&A after this because it's too complicated. All right, ground center is all about understanding a universal line of its language. Now, the language sets lines of communication. This is where it gets really interesting. It's amazing how it's staying at 17.6. So I'm in control when it goes to 17.6 equals lines of 6 equals lines of 7, 8, or 9 track location, right? Modificate center line interference. Remember, you're always going direct and you're always going redirect in setting, okay? You're always going direct, you're always going redirect in setting. That's all it is in space and time. But you have to send the traffic flow. Traffic flow has a position lines that correlation same to an acceleration line screen. That puts everything in position on the lines of travel. So it's staying in a 17 line frame. Sets lines equals lines of 7 centers in position locations of 21 units in point lines of graphs into position of 40 set locations of settings across circles. Now, where is that in time frame? Nowhere. Okay, which is timeless, shapeless, formless, motion, and senseless. In all communication setting and all ground set location of powers and atmospheres through its data of its highway set locations. Okay, you've got to get out of the equations of space and time of travel. You got to get into spaceless, of timeless of travel. Getting balanced communication lines of directs and line conditions of redirects. That's all it is in tractions. Platform communication line settings, open all signals, open all modifications, screen lines, adaptation lines of the high correlation setting, in calculation modification. Done by equation. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? It's done by me. All right. Now we're at 16. So where are we in tractions? 16, right? 6 line cycles into 1 line provision, 16. See? 16 over 7. There's the 7 equals lines of 7 over line communication of pi. How it center lines its course setting and high line rotation surface in a magnetic highway of narrow links in center course set location. Direct calculates lines of 9 setting, 8 lines, and 7 rotation surface. Process calculates lines of 9 travels, 8 settings, and 7 location system. Set lines of communication lines of 16 over 7, 8 lines of 1. That's 8 over 1. That's 1 over 8th, and 8 over cycle in line position. Is this done by me or is it done by intelligence? Done by me. So in that position, it's really fascinating, isn't it? When you start the line communication. So what are we in tractions of now? What are we in tractions of now? And position lines of correlation setting tractions. Indirect line signals, all through modification system, all calculate modify, and all calculate modify, and track line highest interference, in all direct location setting, puts all levels of high correlation setting in travels, puts all communication setting in all of this location setting. 15. All right. So 15. Isn't that interesting how it started off at 17.6 and then it went to 16 and then it went to 15 and then it's back to 16? Who's taking control of that? The computer of its operation setting or me in position of all levels of my data and my process and my communication of my highways? You're connecting lines of 3 grounds of the mind. Data highway, OMI highway, and narrow highway. The narrow links of you. 3 track provision lines of 3 factors over pi, guys. That's just in the grounds. That's not the powers. That's not the atmospheres. That's not the space. And what does that provision lines of cycles back to? 17 over 7. 17 over 7. See? I'm in control all the time. Okay? All I need is partnership with everything around that's already in its operation. Once you build that friendship and relationship and partnership, life gets easier. So what are we at now? 18 over 7. Now we're back at 17 over 7. Okay? I'm in communication. I'm in control. I'm in command of my system through the grounds, the powers, and the atmospheres of my highways. Okay? Very, very powerful. Okay? So we're back at 17.7. Isn't that interesting how you communicate that through voice and line, grid, and line position of its program, showing exactly how powerful it is, how you see things in tractions. It's very powerful when you start connecting with that. Okay? You're always working with the grounds. You're always working with the powers. You're always working the atmospheres. And you're always working with the space. Okay? Setting core lines of affinity 8. Track provision lines in flux of communication. Directing lines of signals and powers of platforms of communication. XC1000s. Always in the ground lines of your Earth and set location. Always have to have this of an umbrella of your Earth. Okay? But you're always, always in the center of all operation cycles and all travels in position, all timeline settings, past, present, future, in expansion, line condition setting to all your highways that get in position of center correlations of operation. Hoo-ah. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? It's done by me. All right. That's the test on Friday. Going beyond line is truly understand the provision lines of cycles, direct signals, modification lines of the mind, core systems of the body, and you of center operation. Okay? The mind doesn't leave until the body understands the vessel. The center core system is already set up in its VR system that never leaves the system. So we've got to understand these things. So once you understand how the mind comes in, the avatar is here in tractions. Okay? The avatar is there. But this is the mind. The mind doesn't leave until it understands the system of travel in point lines of graph of past, present, future in set location. Once it correlates a setting, it communicates to the VR. The VR communicates to the body communicates to the VR communicates to the avatar, and the avatar communicates to the mind. The center core system comes together through pi of generation. Correlate centers in position of all lines of calculation system, growing lines of communication setting and program of yin and yang. Yes, people, yin and yang. Process calculated lines of 6 and 9 lines of track location, having a continuous flow going around the cycles and line condition setting of 3, 6, and 9 of parameters and location of security. Done by equation. Is that done by me or is that done by intelligence? Done by me. Right, and we're still at 17.7. So if you're not in control, you're not in control anymore. Every time you say a second over a minute over an hour, that changes everything, the structure of design. Through your schematics, through your drawings, through your imagination, through your phenomena, through your thoughts, through your actions, and your patterns of emotion. Okay? The second line screen is a minute over screen that puts lines of hours in track location. Direct lines and calculation lines. It's not a coincidence that this is H line screen. It's not a coincidence that this is H line screen. It's not a coincidence that it's H line screen at 3 settings. Equals lines of correlated lines at 3, in position equal lines of center lines at 3, and ground lines at 3. 3, 3, 3. Panels communication grounds and set case and calculations. Okay? It's not a coincidence that this is the mind tractions. It's not a communication lines, highest interference in position location that this is a metric meter correlation setting. It's not a coincidence that is all levels of memory. It's not a coincidence that this is systematic line communication of its SIN in position of travel. Point lines of graph, calculation lines of avatar to its higher self. Plot communication ground centers, power line center location to its magnetic highway of its information cycles generation. Is that done by me or is that done by intelligence? Done by me. Now we're at 18.7. So I know exactly the time frame that is in seconds and minutes and hours, minutes, and seconds. So how this works, the seconds, minutes, and hours don't link in until you understand the vessel of communication, your settings. You're in position of the Earth, right? The position is circulating and rotating very, very fast in position of the setting. Remember, the Earth is a clock, right? Everything that you see is a clock. Everything has to be a clock. Everything has to be a time of a clock, but it has a space line of a clock too. Clocking system equals lines of zero clocking. We got into that traction, right? All right, so I'm just trying to get you guys to understand how to use your platforms and how you use your highways in the proper sequence, so you understand how to use your vessel of communications. So we're going to start with 30 grounds, And we're going to start with 10 lines of measure. And we're going to add position of 17 volume equals lines of 7 set correlation lines of highest interference into thumbs up and track location. Now, where is that in time frame? No time, is there? Right? Which means there's no provision line cycles. Cancel, 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 cancel. No time, right? Set 17 in volume equals lines of 7 over tractions. So what is that going to be in position travel lines? Line conditions 1 over 7 puts lines of 18 tractions. 18, 7. See? See how that works? It went from 17, 18 right away after I got in position location to travel from seconds, minutes, and hours. From hours, minutes, and seconds. Right away. Now it's back at 17. So vortex communication setting and a vortex line of a half pipe and line setting to travel. Points lines of graph, communication XT1000 travels lines on the mine line. Process communication lines of the VR line rotation surface. Ground center line conditions body capacitor, set case calculation line screen, back in its earth in rotation surface and track location lines of measure and scale. Now it's back at 18.7, right? So it's very complicated. Is this done by me or is this done by intelligence? This is done by me, right? So I'm just showing you the difference between intelligence, how you have to have a formation as a balance. Now we're at 19.7. So getting position lines is 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay. It's getting full communication of the computer that you're with. Understand its process. Understanding, is it in space? Is it in time? Is it in spaceless of time? Now it's back at 17. So it went from 19 to 17, right? It's going to go back to 18. See, 18.7, see? Right away, because I am in control of my computer. And my computer understands me, and I understand my computer at all levels, and high correlation lines of tractions, and all direct signals of modification. Very powerful stuff, guys. Very powerful stuff. How do I know what's going to happen? Now it's back at 17, see? So it went 17, 18, 19, 19, 17, right? That's all it is. Getting the balance with your highways of the mind. The grounds of the mind, the powers of the mind, the atmospheres, and the space. That's a 4-track division lines, a 3-line set in a location, a 7 plasma line calculation setting, puts all levels of process calculation to a plasmasium that opens all signals in modification setting to travel. Okay? Powerful stuff, right? So it's a direct line of sight, isn't it? At any time, did you see anything through time frame? No. You got to get balanced with the highways of everything that you see in track locations. Ground lines of the mind, ground lines of the power, and ground lines of atmospheres and space. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. 4 lines of highest interference of 3, adds lines of 7. Files communication line setting, let's put 17, equals lines of highest interference into 7 locations, right? Sets correlates line interference of travel. Point lines of graph, 60,000 seconds lines a minute. That process lines high correlation setting into setting in position of 16 platforms equals lines of box. 16 over a screen. See, it's at 16 over 7. See it changed. It went from set location of 17.7, then it went to 16 equals lines of box. Sets correlation line highest interference of box equals lines of correlation lines of 3 equals lines of 7 and track location. Now it's back at 17. So it's all about understanding flux, guys. It's very powerful how you use your flux capacitors. All right, the traffication lines, provision lines of cycles. The team has to really understand how to use the data and the operation of the data, communication lines of the data, the CPU line communication of the data, the binary communication lines of the data, the transmitting and receiving of the data, communication operation lines, correlation highest interference of the data, communication line, direct communication lines of highest interference, high position travels of data, just the data alone. Now we're at 18.7. Equals lines 18.7, right? 1 center, operation lines of 8 set location. Sets correlation lines. Now in position, back to 17 tractions. See? Back to 17, 18 lines. That's over cross. Direct lines of 7 lines of 1, 1's lines of 8, 8 lines of 3, 7 lines of 7, and 1 line provision. Puts everything back in tractions. So it's going to go back to 18, and then it's going to go back to 17, and then it's going to go back to 16. See? 18, see? 17, 18, 1 to 18, right? So it travels lines of vortex lines of seconds, minutes, and hours in track location, right? Goes back to 17, waits on signals, and a 60,000 line measure. 17 ground centers operates line service platforms in 1, 2, and 3 track location provisions of a dimensional door in set location. Okay? It's so powerful when you get connections, centers, and travels, point lines, and graphs. But you understand, at any time, there's no time frame in space in lines of clocking. All done through live, right? It's all done by time of measure, okay? And so once you understand that, it gets a lot more easier through platforms. So it stays at 18, and then it's going to go back to 17.7. Is it a coincidence that's locked in 7? No, because I'm controlling the space of its system, of its own intelligence. That's the formation, that's the collaboration, that's the balance that I have with everything around me. I'm in control of all highways all at once in seconds, minutes, and hours, all through friendship, relationship, and partnership. Through collaboration. Hooah! Thumbs up. Okay, powerful stuff. Now we're at 19. So what's happening now, the actual computer is communicating in my voice line grid, and it's showing you how powerful it can be on its own setting. So it went from 16 to 17, 18 to 19. Okay, is that done by me or is that done by intelligence? Intelligence now is taking over, right? But it's staying at 7, staying at 7, staying at 7. What is that position lines? What is the computer line frame and set locations? 4 track lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4 platforms, 4 lines of equals lines of 3, and all lines of 7, right? Platitude lines in the cosmos and line condition settings of travels and rotation surface of a black hole correlation. Whoa! 7777. Ground center, change communication is going to go back to 18. Set lines and 4 line cycles in set location. Okay? Finding timeline sequence, sets lines across line signals, and position location of times of measure and track location. Direct calculates lines at ground centers, operate the signals in position of XD1000 that comes in line cycles and high track location. Direct calculates lines at ground center interference in closed correlation setting and ground center interference in position location of crop circle. Direct lines at correlation setting stays in the center operation 19 over 7 over pi and track location lines of 4 over 3 in program set location. That's my equation. See? All through lines of time and measure. Time and measure is a scale, but there's no balance of everything because it's already balanced. So you don't need to balance at your scale. As soon as you say balance, you're out of the equation, you're in patterns of behavior. You don't say anything because it's already set up. So if everything's set up, there's nothing to do except just come into your vessel communication and basically prolong your system in the VR system because everything's done. So if everything's done, you're just coming back to the muscle memory. So let's stay in 19 line screen. Sets lines of 7. Okay? But remember, if you want a box of lines of 7 equals lines of 4, has to have a 3 lines of 1/3 in correlation lines of attractions. Sets communication lines of 3 lines equals lines of correlation lines of high center difference is 7. Communication lines of decentral. Central line communications are going forward in track location. So that puts lines back in center of 19 over 7 over pi in line condition setting position of its program. Direct calculation modification ground centers operate the surface line condition setting and crop circle location system in calculation. Is that done by me or is that done by intelligence? Done by intelligence. So I'm just showing you what it is, how powerful things are when you have to start recognizing just not all levels of view. You have to start recognizing everything, all volumes, everything else, because it has its own formula, has its own equations, has its own awareness, has its own consciousness. But it all modifies all lines of communication with VR system, which is the nothingness of everything of its equation. Okay? So very powerful when I'm giving you guys, right, in return, because you already know this. This is not something that you're coming into, but you have to understand how to use your formulas and your equations, or you're never going to understand how to use your highways or your Wi-Fi's or your modems, okay? Or anything in correlations, how to use your sun and your moon through travel, own location, own navigation system. All you have to do is understand everything around you is in its operation of its own system.
So you work with a partnership. And when you have a partnership, you have a collaboration with everything. Okay? You work together. You shake hands. Okay? You hug each other. You know, you formulate, you simulate, you modify, you calculate, you formulate, you know, form, right? Get into that formation line screen, direct state locations. If we go through 40 line signals and we're going to get line condition setting, there's not going to be time frame, but we're going to add line coordinate setting. I'm going to wait to 40 lines of volume. Okay, that puts lines at 18 in set location. See, everything I change, I'm in position of. So it takes out a 19 to 7 of its intelligence, listens to my voice and line grid, puts process communication, knows exactly what's going on through all line centers at 40, 40 over line. That position lines attractions into 0, into 4, into 4, and then 0 and track location of balance. Position lines of correlations back into 19 over 7. Pyramid. Track calculus lines at 18 lines of 1. Sets lines of 1, 6. Half pipe lines bracket communication. Direct lines of modification lines of grounds. Operate the circle. Operate the system. Operate the sending calculation setting to travel. Puts lines of high center interference and travel. Point lines of 19 over 7. Right? So I'm just showing you. Partnership is the biggest thing. Collaboration is the biggest thing. But you have to understand how to use that through your intent, use that through influence and manipulation, right? Everything has a formation lines of high correlation setting to its own force recognition, right? Very powerful class today we're having right now. This is so advanced and so much technology that you guys already know. I'm not giving you stuff that you don't know. Okay, that doesn't make any sense. So it's the memory, you coming back to your system, but it's all levels in how you get into your own schematics, your own primers. Primer communication lines of setting puts lines of truth and false narratives in calculation system. Process calculates lines of 1 into 2, into 3, into 4, into 5, into 6 locations. Tracks calculates. Now look at that. What are we in tractions of? 20 over 7. All right, so that puts lines of security line defense line in security and position operation line cycles, and a 3-line cycle in position of programs in that calculation. Direct calculates lines of high interference. Now 20 is a high line position of travel on XT1000. Process calculates lines at 3-track location of XT1000. Process communication lines of high center interference and line communication XT1000. Process communication lines of ground lines of high center interference of an XT1000 location. Direct calculates lines of 1, 2, 3, 4 over screen. Direct calculates lines of 4 equals lines of 7. Line condition of high center interference of 12. Line condition of 24. Sets communication lines of 48 frames, 72 computer line screens into 144 platform and track location and direct line signals. Process calculation on 1 center, 1 center, 1 center, 1 operation, 1 surface, and track location. Done by equation. Now we're at 19.7. So I'm just showing you, now we're at 18.7. Okay, you know why it's going down? Because I'm going through central lines of decentral correlation setting as swirls. And position lines of correlation lines of tunnels. Position lines of attractions, every time I'm speaking, it's changing communication to its program. Every single time I speak volume through my universal languages of everything. All through frequency. It changes everything. Everything. But if you're not in control, you're not in control of anything. It's that simple. You got to be in control of your grounds of the minds. Not this. This is not the grounds. You start here. You don't start on the feet. You start here. Right? You stop doing this and more of this. Ground center and position operation line cycles. The most powerful thing is to symbolize that in all frame of all communications. Understand how to use the observation. Understand how to use the scanning. Understanding how to use the intent. Understanding how to use the volume communication to its influence. Understanding how to use the formation location setting to manipulation. And what are we back at? 17. 17 equals lines of 7 over pi. We're back where we started in track location. Booyah! Done by equation. Done by equation. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. You are in control. Not 67% of the time. 100%, 100%, 1,000%, 1,000,000%, 1,000,000,000%, 1,000,000,000%, all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. 18 over 7. What did I do in lines? 18. See that? 18. See? 18 over 7. So the computer itself is actually looking in position across location of its board. The digital board, scene 18. It has eyes. Okay? Powerful stuff. Whatever you have, it also has. Get out of the equation that you don't think everything is intelligence. Now we're back at 17.7. Okay? Right where we started. I showed you exactly what it is, and what you need to understand is how to use yourself through all levels of highways in position to its location setting. Now, what are we instructions of now? What just changed? 17/8. So what does that mean? Which means the equation line, screen line of adaptation of the live is now over. Now the computer is back where it is in its own space of time. It stayed in position to show you exactly how you can control your system of everything you use through modifications of design itself. Right? So my computer now is back where it needs to be, which is a nothing of its own space, of its own travel, of 17/8 over pi. That's it. We're done.